Explain why the Bolsheviks won the Civil War. You may use the following in your answer: Trotsky, war communism. You must also use information of your own. 12 marks. Here's the mark scheme for this question, which you can find out about in more detail in the overview video. Now, we know that 6 marks are available for AO2, which is your analysis of causation. Remember that the question has asked you to explain why. That means that you need to think about the factors and things, events, developments that led to this. So what do you think caused it? Now, you can use the 2 stimulus points given to you in the question. You don't have to, but you can. Just remember though that if you do use them, it's also really important that you use evidence of your own knowledge, because if you only use the stimulus points, you hit what's called a mark ceiling, and that means that you can't actually score in the higher bands if you're only using the information given to you in the question. That brings us on to AO1, which is also worth 6 marks, and that is for you bringing in your knowledge and understanding of the period. When you're bringing in these factors, you need to show the examiner that you know the topic really well to explain this causation. Here are the bottom 2 bands for this question. Now, you might notice that we're seeing words like straightforward, not developed, general, lack of organisation. That means that maybe you've listed some factors that contributed to this event, but you haven't really explained them. So to show the examiner that you know the topic really well, you need to explain that factor in enough detail. That might mean bringing in evidence from your own knowledge to just expand on it a little bit, maybe making comments that take that factor and link it back to the question. In terms of organisation, it should be quite easy for the examiner to follow, so quite a nice logical structure where you move from one factor to the next to the next. Also, if you're scoring in these 2 bands, it might mean that you haven't brought in enough of your own knowledge. Remember what we said about the stimulus points. It's great to use them, but just make sure that you're showing the examiner that you know the topic well enough to bring in bits of information from the stuff that you already know. These are the top 2 bands. Now here we're seeing words like analytical, consistently directed to the question, coherent, logical. So firstly, in order to be analytical, you need to have stated the factor that you think was an important cause and then explained it. So you've brought in bits of your own knowledge. You've explained why that caused the event, so make it really clear what you're arguing. That then will make it much easier for the examiner to follow your structure, to really understand what you're arguing. That way, the examiner knows that you know this topic really well. You're confident enough with the material to make a really well-justified argument, and one that analyses exactly what the question has asked you to do. There are many points you could have made here, so as long as what you say is relevant and correct, the examiner will award you the marks. But let's take a look at an example. So one point might have been that the Bolsheviks were an organised and united force, whereas the opposition was formed of many separate groups, all of which had different interests and different objectives, so they weren't as effective at war. There are other points here, so do take a look and see if there's anything else you could have added to your answer.